How often have you said to yourself, why am I even eating? While there can be an aspect of habit to emotional eating, the biggest clue is in the name. It's your emotions. In this video, I will share with you the 8 most common emotional culprits. Sometimes just hearing what they are can help you to gain some understanding, and that is the first step towards being able to do something different. Stay tuned till the end of the video, where I'll also give you some tips about what else you can do to help yourself with those emotions and with taking different actions in the future. There's an acronym that I like to use to help me remember the emotions most commonly found in emotional eating, which is SABAS. It stands for stress, anxiety, boredom, anger, sadness, and the bonus that I often find is there is shame. So let's take a deeper look at all of these. Stress, of course, is the modern plague. Our lives tend to be very busy, very fast-paced, with lots of different things going on and a lot of different demands on our attention. It's really normal that we feel stressed. However, different people manage that stress in different ways. And quite often, if we've established a pattern in our formative years of using food to help us deal with that, then that's something that continues later on in life and can lead to these difficulties. And speaking of the past, anxiety for me is about stress in the present triggering something from the past. It's a little bit different to the fact that you may have developed a way of coping with stress that's connected with food. Rather, it's about something in the present triggering a far stronger and deeper emotion because it was something from the past. For example, being criticized by your boss in the present could be a normal form of stress. However, if you received a lot of criticism, for example, from an authority figure when you were a child, then that criticism from the boss now can trigger the feelings of being constantly criticized by an authority figure from the past, and that makes it much worse and much harder to deal with. However, the good news is that there are ways of healing the emotional situations from the past so that that anxiety is no longer triggered by the stress which is almost unavoidable in the present. I mentioned boredom, and this is one that people very often say, "Oh, I ate because I was bored, I had nothing better to do. I just didn't feel like doing anything, so I had some food. It gave me something to do." And I really understand that that's often how you might feel. Yet my own experience with this is that nobody really has to be bored or is bored. There's always something else underlying it. And I split this in 2 different directions. Firstly, there's the side of feeling like you don't have anything to do. Now, realistically, especially in our modern world, there are always things that you can be doing. So then the question arises, why are you not doing them? And I think there are 2 different answers that branch out from this. The first one is related to perfectionism, which is found so much in people who have issues around food and eating disorders. This is that if you feel like you can't do something well enough, you are blocked from even starting it at all because you're worried that you'll fail. And this is very common because perfectionism, this feeling like you have to be perfect, you have to do everything right, that something awful will happen if you don't, is something that is found very often. And clearly, this does have connections with what I was saying about anxiety. These are beliefs and ideas established in the past that then move into our future and block us from doing things in the present. The second branch of this is feeling uninspired. And one part of this might be that you've just finished up a project and therefore you're not really feeling inspired in the moment because either you haven't fully celebrated what happened before or you're just not quite ready to move on. And that's the easier version to deal with. A different part might be that you haven't yet found your big why, the thing that will motivate you, and that's what's blocking your inspiration now. The second branch that can come from boredom is about who you want to do something with. And if you feel like there is nobody that you can do something with, that can be what leads you towards feelings of boredom. Yet really what underlies this is loneliness. And this is another of those modern plagues. So many people these days live on their own, work long hours, may not be close to friends, or friends have similar issues, not being able to get away, not being able to do things. And so loneliness can be a real issue. There are things that you can do in the short term to help, and also things you can do in the longer term. For example, in the short term, one thing I sometimes suggest to people is getting involved in something online, or even, for example, watching YouTube videos, something that feels chatty, friendly, or, for example, ASMR videos, which are about triggering that sense of connection and of intimacy that is part of what is missing when we're feeling lonely. So as a short-term solution, it can be something that's helpful. In the longer term, you do want to look at ways that you can connect with people more, whether it's making sure that you make time to call friends and meet up with them, whether it's finding new groups of people to connect with. There are different ways of going about it, and being aware of the issue is always the first step. The second A of Sabas is anger. And one of the things here is that as women, we are often discouraged from feeling anger, though it is something that often pops up its head towards the time of perimenopause. And some people say that maybe this is necessary, that we finally get in touch with our anger. However, that's a discussion perhaps for a different day. One of the things that I have found with anger is that, a little bit like the science now shows, that, for example, smacking a pillow and imagining somebody's face doesn't actually help to remove the anger. In fact, it can make it stronger. In the same way, techniques like tapping may simply enliven the anger, bring it into focus. And what I've found is that we need to direct it elsewhere. It's a bit like the idea of anger being fiery. You don't want to burn your own hand, put your hand in the fire. What you need to do is put something between you and the fire. For example, get something that needs cooking, put that onto a cooking implement and put that between you and the fire. Then you actually end up with something nutritious because you've used that fire to create something productive and nourishing. And I think it's the same with anger. If we understand where it's coming from, then we can find a way of using it, of channeling it, that is more productive than either exploding at other people who may not actually be the source of our anger, or directing it against ourselves. The second S in Sabas is sadness. And this also is a little different, I think. In this case, it's not about redirecting the sadness elsewhere. It's about using tools to help you float on the sadness. I would say that you can't just get rid of sadness. It is a deep well that can come up for very valid reasons. But being able to surf those waves of sadness, or to sit in a boat on that sea of sadness and dangle your fingers in so that you can be in touch with that emotion, but without being flooded by it, without drowning in it. So having like a life belt that will help protect you is very helpful here. I think that it's important to allow your sadness to be. It almost certainly exists for a real reason. So finding a way, as I say, to be able to connect with it in ways that are perhaps smaller and safer, so that you can gradually get used to it until it no longer feels so overwhelming, can be a really helpful way of dealing with the sadness rather than swallowing it down. The final emotion that we need to talk about, the third S of Sabas, is shame. And here, one distinction I like to make is that between feeling guilty and feeling shame. Guilt is often about something that we have actually done or said or not done or not said. But there's definitely a component where we carry part of the blame, perhaps. There is a real reason why the guilt is there. And that can be good to know because then we can do something to remedy it. The reason that shame becomes such an issue for emotional eating is because shame is when we take something that we might have been guilty about and then we make it about us, about our identity. So, for example, if you say something to somebody, that you then make that mean that you are a bad person, a horrible human being, or that you have no kindness, or that you are cruel. Any of those things is changing the fact that you said something that was a bit mean into you are the worst person in the world. And that's the difference between I'm guilty of having said something mean, perhaps I was tired, perhaps whatever the reasons might be, to I am a bad person, I don't deserve to be happy in life. And that's a very different kind of feeling. It's also interesting with shame that we can have shame around having any of the other 6 or 8, depending on how you count them, emotions of sabbath. So you can feel shame that you get stressed so much. You can feel shame that you exploded angrily. But it's also about the fact that you then make that mean that you are an unlovable person or a broken person, whatever it is that is that deeply held belief of not being enough or being bad, being wrong, something to do with your identity that turns this into shame. Also, we can have shame around our eating itself. Shame about what you're eating, shame about how you're eating it, shame about when you're eating it, whatever it might be. Shame, therefore, can be quite complex, and it's really important to unpick the different strands so that you can heal those beliefs which are shifting guilt into shame. These then are the emotions that are most commonly found when there's emotional eating. Sabbath, stress, anxiety, boredom, split up into procrastination, lack of inspiration, and loneliness, anger, sadness, and shame. So, what can you actually do about these? Tapping and havening are very good ways of calming your emotions, lowering your stress levels, and making space for you to deal with the underlying beliefs and thoughts that may be connected with anxiety or shame, for example. Breathing can also be a great way of just lowering the volume on any of these emotions and getting a little bit more connected to yourself in the present moment, being more mindful of what is real. It can also be a way of helping yourself feel calmer so that you can stay with these emotions more, because emotions are perfectly natural and normal. It's about how do you cope with them so that you can manage them, feel them, and not be overwhelmed by them. A couple of other things that can help with managing these emotions are exercise or being out in nature. These are things that help us to be more present and also lower stress levels, so that they're good ways of coping with emotional overwhelm. And of course, connecting with other people. It's a great way of building rapport, of feeling more calm, more confident, more loved. It can also, as I say, be a part of what's underlying the boredom loneliness equation. But just calling a friend or meeting up with someone or getting a hug or whatever it might be for you are great ways of helping you to manage your emotion more. As people say, a problem shared is a problem halved, and there is definitely an element of that in any of these emotions. So if that's something available to you, make use of it. Call someone. Hopefully, just thinking about, reflecting on these different emotional culprits most often underlying emotional eating can help you to get clearer about what it is that has been a trigger for you. And getting clear on it is part of the way forward to managing those emotions and doing something different with them. If you feel like you could do with a little more help with that, I have a more in-depth series on the emotions that underlie emotional eating, where I go into more detail about how to use different tools and techniques to help you in managing these emotions. So why not take a look at that?